I'm doing a presentation here on social permaculture. Um, and Kelly's Working Well Farm is the farm that we started in 2012. And we recently did sort of a rebranding. So we have our new logo at the bottom of the screen here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it just kind of shows that we have the farm, but we also have below it several of the initiatives that we have started and are some are more in the aspirational stages. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So just um, I want to present sort of my definition of permaculture. So I would say that for me, permaculture is a systems thinking approach to design and problem solving that uses nature as a model. So that's kind of the way I define permaculture. And traditionally, it's been used to design, agriculture systems, um, and so on. But it can really be used for just about any kind of human problem that you have. Um, so, um, so I'm going to go through. So the structure of the presentation today will be out. I'm going to go through some different examples of social permaculture that I either am directly involved in or that I'm interested in. And I'm going to sort of look at some of the different permaculture principles and see how they apply to these different structures. So this is a nice website that I like to go to, permacultureprinciples.com. And I cut and pasted this page, but they have this page that has the different principles here, and it's cool because it's an interactive website, and you can just click on one, and then you can get examples of it. So in this case, they have these 12 principles. I've certainly gone, and read other things that had different numbers of principles and slightly different principles. So you don't have to just be stuck with these, but the 12 principles are here, and the other ones that you might see in other places are just kind of nice to go to inspire you to when you're thinking about solving a problem. I like to go to the principles to get some inspiration. Anybody have any questions at this point? Okay. So I'm not gonna go through all of the principles right now, and I'm not probably gonna even use all of them today. But I will use a bunch of them. So we'll talk about specific ones in more detail. And I just want to look at my time. Okay, so I'm doing pretty well. All right. So the first example I'm going to use is the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective. So the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective started in 2016 when I was faced with sort of the problem of we had bought the property for the farm in the summer of 2012, and I was teaching full time during the school year at a local private school. And I just, and we started right away during summer camps. So, I knew when I started the farm that I wanted to we started as a community educational farm. And our goal was to bring the community onto the farm and have them be part of it. And I knew that bringing kids in was, a big leverage point for bringing the rest of the community in. And so we started with summer camps. And since I was an educator, the education thing was kind of a natural thing to think about. So when I was faced with the problem of I am not on the farm a good 9 months out of the year because I have to go off the farm to work, how can I solve that problem? The idea of having a school at the farm made a lot of sense. And initially, I started sort of developing curriculum and thinking about a more conventional school that certainly, was focused toward growing things and natural cycles and all of that. But as I thought more about it, I realized that I didn't really like that idea of the whole school model just wasn't really working in a lot of ways. I knew as a teacher that no matter how enthusiastic I was about some bit of curriculum, um, and by the way, I was a physics teacher mostly. Um, Kids, they're not always, in fact, most of the time, they're not. That's not what they want to learn about at that moment. That's not where they are. And to assume that a whole group of kids that you have in front of you is going to want to learn about the same things that you want to talk about on that particular day is kind of silly. So a colleague of mine recommended the Sudbury School model. He thought I might be interested in that, and I looked at it, and it immediately clicked with me. So just a little, just a little explanation of the model is it's self-directed learning in a supportive community. So what that means is there's no curriculum. In fact, we believe that kids self-chosen activities are basically the highest form of learning that they can have. And we provide structure in where we have a community, we have group decision making, we have rules that everyone discusses and votes on, and we have various committees that manage certain aspects of the program, like use of tools, use of art materials, use of a kitchen, and so on. So that's the model. So one of my favorite permaculture principles is from patterns to details. And actually, for a long time, I didn't really understand this particular principle, because I think in most permaculture classes, the examples they use for patterns to details are by and large geometric. So they'll say, look at the sunflower and the spiral and the way the seeds are arranged, or um, use other kinds of more, or even fractals, which is cool, but use geometric models. And what I realized is that it's not just geometric patterns in nature, but it's also like behavioral patterns, and just, like, for example, human nature is a nature pattern, right? Humans are nature. And so the pattern of a child born is that they are immediately striving to learn everything they can about their environment so they can figure out how to navigate it and um, be a sort of fully realized element or member of that, their environment, of the society that they're in, the humans that they're interacting with. So I would say the our model for the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective is human nature. And what we're doing is we're saying we're basing our model on the belief that humans want to learn, they want to constantly learn, and they also want to be competent members and contributing members of their society. And um, so these days in the world, it's a very, certain skills are very important. Not just social skills, getting along and communicating with each other, but skills like reading, and skills like math. And I think that any child who is in the world with other people is going to realize that learning how to read is something that is very important for them to be a fully empowered member of the community. And not only that, it's also very enjoyable. And if they see people around them using that tool of reading to get things done, but also for personal enjoyment, they're going to be very strongly motivated to learn that skill. And in fact, we see that. We do have, so our program has been around since 2016, as I said, the fall of 2016. And we have participants who've been with us for several years who came in not reading and who are now reading with no formal instruction on reading. Similarly, math is math is a handy tool for for doing things that you want to do in your daily life, whether it's like cooking or using money, um, building things. Math comes in handy, and our participants realize that, and so they develop those skills that they need as they need them. And I think most importantly, our participants learn that if there's something that they want to learn, they know that they can do that. And that's the most powerful, I think, skill that they learn. So again, with the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective, having it on a farm is kind of a unique aspect of it that some of the other, Sudbury style schools don't have. And I love this one for the edges and the marginal principle of using edges, because like if you have edges between ecosystems, those are often the most productive. And so taking the farm and having this program, which we use the word school loosely, it's not, it's kind of an unschool, it's not really a school, if you think about the definition of the word school. But you get a lot of opportunities for just more great stuff. So you see, this one participant is harvesting grapes that we're not currently growing on the farm, but they went to another farm to harvest the grapes. And then I love this one with the broody hens. So really the kids become a part of the farm, and they provide a lot of services actually, like watching. They're really good and really interested in watching over the well-being of the animals. So they will constantly come and report to me, like, this chicken is, or this rooster is beating up on the hens, or this goat or sheep is limping, those kind of things. And so they provide a lot of feedback that's helpful to me on the farm. And obviously the farm is providing them a lot of opportunity for learning, as they do. What I notice about the kids is those kids get inspired by certain things, and certain kids um, do very intense observation, whereas where they have names and they know the habits of every single chicken on the farm, and that's incredible focus and attention to detail that they're practicing when they do that. Another really important thing about the model is that age mixing. Um, so I think that we really do a huge disservice to our kids when we segregate them by age, and particularly when we segregate them by, supposedly, skill levels or whatever they do. The kids, again, going back to the human nature, they're intensely interested in learning from other kids. And they're intensely interested in learning from other kids of different ages than they are. And it doesn't just go one way. So it's not just like the older kids are always teaching the younger kids, although that does happen. There's also a benefit for kids that may not be comfortable certain ways socially or whatever with their peer group, and maybe they want a chance to interact with younger kids, and they get the chance to be like the big kid, or the expert on something. And I think that is really so beneficial to the kids. So the interage mixing is essential, and so valuable and productive. All along, as the farm was developing, I really, I kept thinking there's so much that can be done on this in this space. We have the learning we had the learning collective operating in the space. Um, but I also was interested in developing other programs and using the farm to sort of leverage them. So I don't know how many of you have heard of the transition town movement. Um, there's also there are time banks, and there are also things that I'm really interested in, that I think the farm can contribute to, and the community members of the farm, like local earth restoration projects and so on. So recently, we several of us who were involved in the learning program and the farm, were we had the need to sort of be able to articulate a vision that was bigger than just the farm. And one of our parents came up with this phrase, more than a farm. And and it really at first I wasn't quite excited about it, but then the more I thought about it, um the more excited I was about it. And so this idea that we are more than a farm, um, has allowed us to articulate some of the other initiatives that we are doing or interested in making happen, as I said before. So, and it also it also forced us to determine our values as a sort of as a conceptual framework. So, the sort of connecting values of these initiatives are earth-centered education, community resilience building, earth stewardship, social justice, and rootedness in history and place. And so we have these different initiatives. Obviously, the farm, this second. So then we had a friend of ours who, in his former life, was a graphic designer. And so I asked him if he could help us visualize this concept. And so we came up with these. We came up with these ideas, and he made them, visual, to represent these different initiatives. So the farm, the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective, with this image of the children playing in the tree. So you see the kids playing together in a somewhat, what people might call risky, a little bit risky play, which we think is awesome. That's like on the edge there of your comfort level and beyond your comfort level. And then the next thing was, we've been putting in some forest gardens, and also developing a nursery. And so this symbol with the hazelnut and the pawpaw and the mushroom represents that initiative of the nursery and the forest gardens. And then something that I'm intensely interested in developing right now is an internship program, so that we can develop people who are interested in doing agriculture and sustainable agriculture, permaculture, and so on. Um, and that's something that I'm working on getting going on the farm. The next symbol represents our transition initiative that we started with the time bank um, a couple years ago. It's kind of gone into suspension mode with COVID and some other problems that we're having, which I might talk about a little bit more with our local township. But that is an initiative that we're slowly going to be developing. And then the Ohio Earth Restoration, Northeast Ohio Earth Restoration, is another initiative that is kind of just in its infancy. But the idea of then developing maybe teams that can go out to projects beyond the farm to do earth restoration. And then finally, the Reeds and Roots symbol, which is Reeds and Roots is a Skillshare organization that has developed kind of parallel with us, but we are their fiscal sponsor. So they're very much related in these initiatives. So 2 years ago in 2019, the local township came in and we were having this program, the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective, which at the time we were calling Chagrin Valley School. And they came and they said, "Oh, you're operating a private school here, and you need to have occupancy permits and be inspected and blah blah blah." And so they shut us down, and so we can't have the program at the moment on the farm. In fact, they've been super aggressive. It's been a little insane. We're not even supposed to have any people on the farm other than adult volunteers, which now their lawyer is saying what she really meant by that was the public. So but anyway, it's a big mess. But what I want to say is this permaculture principle: creatively use and respond to change. In other words, another way to phrase that is use a problem as an opportunity. That's one of my favorite permaculture principles. And honestly, whenever like something happens and there's some sort of obstacle or something happening, it's really like challenging for me, and I would say that the past 2 years have been the most challenging time of my life for sure. Is how can we use this as an opportunity to grow, um, and create in a creative way? And to be honest, once we're through this, I think that it will have been one of those cases where what we came out with was much better than what we went into it with. And so that principle of creatively use and respond to change, to me, has been like really helped me get through some very difficult times. And I think what we've done is we've used the challenge to do this whole regrouping. We looked at really what is it about the program, the Chagrin Valley School program, that we really value, and how can we take that program and make it more understandable to people, and how can we also have this program within the constraints of our society, the rules and regulations of our society. So one of the biggest difficulties and challenges we're coming up against is the various laws, and the fact that what we're doing doesn't fit into a neat box that our current society like expects. So their lawyer is like, "Are you a school? Are you a farm?" you know we should, if we were being correct and obeying the rules, we would obviously be one or the other. And that for us to try to be both was some kind of sneaky trick we were trying to pull the wool over their eyes. And so those kind of challenges really like force us to really define what we're doing, and also just basically figure out better ways to articulate our goals and our values. And so again, we did this sort of rebranding, um and if you see this what I call an informational graphic here with the tree and the leaves, and the roots, what you'll notice is that we use those icons that our friend Derek came up with, for the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective and the internship program. And we also we reached out to various organizations that we'd worked with in the past, including Lake Erie Institute, to say, we want to like sort of make this collaboration a little more formal and a little more like productive and generative, and worked with these other organizations in the community to help realize our objectives and our mutually shared objectives. So these, the social justice, community resilience building, rootedness, and history in place. And what other organizations in our community also have these values, and how can we work with them? And by developing this kind of a graphic, it actually makes it a lot easier to like just explain what we're about. Is just here. Look at this picture. And so that's another thing that I've realized is like having that visual is really helpful, because sometimes explaining in words when you're doing something that doesn't fit neatly into a box, um, having other ways of presenting it is very helpful. All right, so this is a permaculture principle that isn't in the 12 of in the Permaculture Principles website, but I always, when I learned about this one, I always really liked it. These two, they kind of there were two of them that kind of always resonated with me. One is stacking elements, and one is stacking functions. And sometimes I get confused about them, but I thought this sort of visual might help understand it. So in stacking elements, you're designing. So what we're designing is a system that works together, right? And that's what you do, like when you design a guild or something, when you're doing like a garden design in permaculture. And stacking elements means that what you're doing is you're putting multiple elements into the design that reinforce and perform a similar function. Okay. And that gives you resilience, because if one of the elements is not working, you can still continue to perform that function because you have the other elements that can come in and step in and do that, or are doing that already. And so if we think about our mission, one of our values as community education, we really have 3 of these initiatives, and even more really, but these 3 initiatives are really performing that function. And then on top of that, if you bring in like Lake Erie Institute, for example, that's another education, a community education element that we're kind of pulling in, that we can as a collaborator. So we've got the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective has that educational mission, mostly focused on the children. The internship program, which can really overlap and work with teenagers, and people of all ages. And then with the Reads and Roots Skillshare, their mission is also community education on a more a sort of occasional, basis, where we bring, we say, okay, we're going to have a weekend, and we're going to do a lot of different fun sort of skill classes, and people can come in and take a class, here or there, or take a couple classes on this weekend. So that's an example, I would say, of stacking elements. And then the stacking functions, which I would say, I guess, in the 12 permaculture principles you could say is on the overlaps with the obtain a yield permaculture principle. And so in stacking functions, what you're looking at is a single element that performs multiple functions. And so you want, when you design a permaculture guild, you want each element to perform multiple functions, and thus obtain those various yields. So in thinking of having the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective on the farm, the collective brings in one of the main things that I was interested in when I even from the very beginning, was that it brings committed adults into the community. So if your child is here in this program and thriving, then as an adult you become committed to this program, but also you get interested in the wider goals and projects of the farm and the various other initiatives. So like Esty, I look at Esty, and she came in through the collective, and then she got interested in permaculture, and now she's so interested in permaculture. And so it's kind of cool the way that really does work out. It also, when we have programs on the farm, they bring in customers for our farm products. Actually, one of the reasons why I really started the program in the first place was that it would allow me to be on the farm all day rather than having to go off to my other school. So that was a huge benefit of having the program on the farm for me. And I think I mentioned before the way kids are become a sort of really helpful, integral part of the farm functions by Also finding eggs, they love to do that. So the third social structure that I wanted to talk about was this was sociocracy, which is a system of decision making that I've been become really interested in recently. A governance model which we don't use currently in the Chagrin Valley Learning Collective. Currently, the model that we use is democracy. So we have a direct democracy. So we discuss rules and policies and then vote on them. And each member of the community, each participant has an equal vote. So one of the important things about Chagrin Valley Learning Collective is that no one has more power than anyone else, including the adults. So, 5-year-old and an adult staff member each have one vote in our community decision making. But sometimes democracy is a little, I don't know, not always actually fair, because like you get these problems where the majority thinks something, but the minority might have like a really strong concerns and be very negatively affected by a certain policy. And yet if it's just majority ruled, then whereas the majority just are like, whatever, I'm going to vote this way, but I don't even have that much skin in the game. In sociocracy, um, decisions are made by circles or domains of groups of people that have interest in a particular issue. Um, and the method that they use is not majority rule, but it's consent. And what that means is you go around the circle, and if you've been presented and discussed a proposal, and if you can live with that proposal and it's okay, then you give your consent. But if you can't, if you have a paramount objective to it, and what that means is that it would actually inhibit your or the community's ability to fulfill the role, the mission of the organization, then you can object and not give your consent. And then what happens is that the proposal will get modified until consent is given by every member. Or if that is never able to happen, then the proposal would be rejected. So it's kind of cool. Okay, so the permaculture principle here, I gotta move this, that I like is this design from patterns to details again. And so I am using this geometrical model. This is a Queen Anne's picture of a Queen Anne's lace. So you can kind of see the fractals. So you see how the smaller little flowerlets look just kind of like the bigger one. So you have these different repeating scales. So you got this pattern. And in sociocracy, you have these really overlapping circles or domains for various decision making things. So you might have a domain for making decisions about who should be a member of this organization, or practical matters like who's going to organize the kitchen, and what are the rules for using the kitchen, or what's our marketing going to be like. So you have these different domains that are are these different circles, like these little bit of flowers, but they're all connected to each other, in this case kind of centrally. But in sociocracy, they're connected by having members that are part of each circle that overlap, which is kind of cool. So yeah, I feel like this is so it's a nice non-hierarchical decision-making model, and nature is certainly not hierarchical and certainly not controlled from the top down. Another permaculture principle that sociocracy utilizes is this: apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So one of the reasons that a lot of organizations like to adopt sociocracy is because really it can allow for for like sort of rapid sort of prototyping. Like, so proposals don't have to be perfect, they just have to be good enough. And then you put them in place, and then you can see how they work, and then you can quickly go back to them and modify them. So it's a nice way of, and I sort of use the slack line as a sort of picture of that, where, you know, in a slack line, obviously you're getting a lot of feedback really quickly on whether, you know, you're able to navigate it successfully. um, and so that's a nice aspect of sociology.